Ah, philosophers, those men who had time to sit around and think about things. All right, let's start with Thomas Hobbes. Hobbes lived during a time of amazing upheaval, as all the minor kingdoms throughout Europe were waging war against each other in a bid to create the nation states we know today. When he observed the various rulers of these kingdoms, he saw that the way they got to rule was because weaker groups were willing to give up their freedom in order to be protected by a stronger ruler to prevent further violence. In Hobbes' mind, the life of a man is nasty, brutish, and short because people are selfish and violent. If you let men be free, everyone is in danger. In other words, the interests of a single individual can risk the security of the majority. Therefore, people must give up their freedoms to a leader who will get to rule as he sees fit in order to keep them safe. Hobbes saw that words on their own are weak, and you must be willing to use violence. We can see an example of this in the League of Nations, who failed to prevent the expansion of Japan into China and Italy into Abyssinia, which is now known as Ethiopia, because they refused to use force. Many dictators would use the arguments of Hobbes to support the lack of freedom in their country, because without control, there would be anarchy. Half a century later, and there's more stability in Europe with the establishment of nation states. Not to say these nation states didn't pick fights with each other all the time. Locke disagreed with Hobbes and said overall people are rational and reasonable. He felt people should rely on themselves to make important decisions, as long as your decisions don't take away the rights of someone else. During Locke's lifetime, most decisions were being made by the monarch. Locke disagreed with the idea of the divine right of kings, which monarchs were using to justify why they had the job. Locke argued that real power rests with the people of a nation state, and the government should exist to protect life, liberty, and property. People will have to give up some freedoms in order to have this protection, but overall, individual rights are the focus, instead of communal security. And if the government fails to protect their people or their interests, then the people have the right to rebel. The colonists in the Americas took this literally and overthrew the British monarchy over a dispute regarding the taxation of tea. Okay, it was more than that, but the Boston Tea Party and the subsequent revolution was based on the ideas of Locke. Ah, Rousseau. Now here's an interesting character. Now, while Rousseau didn't necessarily promote the ideas of democracy the way Locke did, with a focus on individual rights, Rousseau did want a type of democracy. This philosopher looked at the laws of nature and felt that we as humans were repressing our natural character in the name of good behavior. He's famous for saying, "Man is born free, but everywhere is in chains." Okay, that doesn't mean Rousseau felt everyone should be able to do whatever they want. In fact, he felt individualism leads to jealousy and corruption as people become more selfish. So he recommended that people should come together and create a social contract, an agreement of how to behave and live peacefully together. These rules would be created by the group. That means it's a form of direct democracy. But then the enforcement of the general will of the people would be imposed on everyone. This is not the same idea as Locke had of a society set up to protect the rights of the individual. Instead, it's enforcing communal norms. Rousseau really respected the Aboriginal societies in North America that were based on these ideas of collective norms and called the native peoples noble savages, which at the time was actually a compliment. Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau are seen as the essential Enlightenment philosophers, but there are those that disagreed with them. The most famous would be Karl Marx. Marx saw what was happening to the societies that followed those liberal ideas of democracy and the free market. He saw that democracy really just means political power for rich white men, and the free market only increases the gap between the rich and the poor because the rich factory owners, he called them the bourgeoisie, took advantage of the workers, referred to by Marx as the Proletariat. Marx felt people needed to work together to benefit the group, but he knew humans would naturally be selfish, so they're going to have to be taught, indoctrinated, to learn how to share. At first, there would need to be a dictatorship to get everything organized, get everyone on the same page, but after a while, everyone would agree that creating a society based on equality and sharing is better. So there'd be very little need for government because the people would rule themselves. Now, we're going to look at these communist ideas in more detail later, and you're going to find that while on paper there's some good ideas there, that temporary dictatorship becomes pretty permanent and pretty ruthless. So now to review. think about what each philosopher said about the nature of human beings, what they think should be the role of an individual in society, what they think the role of government should be in a society, and by their ideas, can you tell if they're more individualist or more collectivist? Did you think we were done? Not yet. I just wanted to introduce you to a few other philosophers who've influenced our society. Voltaire, his most famous quote regarding freedom of speech is, "I may not agree with what you say, but I will fight to the death your right to say it." Montesquieu, he's the one that we say gave us the idea of breaking government into different pieces so that the rulers of a nation can't abuse their power. It protects rule of law. So thank him for needing to know the purpose of the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of government. Adam Smith, he's known as the father of capitalism. No, not some crazy name for his kid. Instead, his book, The Wealth of Nations, is considered everything you need to know to be a successful capitalist. Essentially, his idea is that if people are free to buy and sell goods without the government getting in the way, the economy will grow. We're going to look at his ideas in more detail in a future lesson. John Stuart Mill. Mill loved the ideas of Locke and Smith, the ideas that people should be free to do as they wish as long as they're not hurting anyone else. But he also saw that we needed some government intervention. For one, he wanted women to have the right to vote, and he felt workers should have some protection against the worst abuses of capitalism. Okay, now I'm done.